Hello, everyone, and we are very, very happy to have you here today for our webinar on the amazing Imagine Neighborhood podcast and how you can use that with your Second Step program or integrate it into your other SEL activities. And I'm very, very happy to introduce two of my colleagues to you who are very involved with our Imagine Neighborhood podcast. And I will start by just inviting Casey Escola to say hello and introduce yourself to our audience today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Escola. It's great to meet you. I'm a program manager for the Imagine Neighborhood and a few of Committee for Children's other projects. And I'm so excited to be here and talk about one of my all-time favorite projects, the Imagine Neighborhood.
Great. And here's the star of the show. For many of you Imagine Neighborhood fans, you might be excited to meet our Scotty Aseri here live in person.
Hi, I'm Scotty Aseri. I'm the host and the creator of the Imagine Neighborhood, and I work on the innovation team at Committee for Children, where the whole thing was born.
Great. Well, I'm going to take all of us now over to a PowerPoint presentation where we can learn a little bit more about the Imagine Neighborhood. Great. So before we start talking about the Imagine Neighborhood, I did want to share with you a little bit about Committee for Children. For those of you that are unfamiliar with our organization, we are a nonprofit organization and we are based in Seattle, Washington, which is where Scotty and Casey and I are broadcasting from today. And we are very proud to say that we are reaching over 20 million kids in all 50 states. And we also have our work around the world as well. So our mission is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning and development. And we also do advocacy work in your state capital and also in Washington, D.C. So we're very proud of this, and you're welcome to come to our Committee for Children website to learn more about that work. And I also wanted to share with you, we are very committed at Committee for Children to equity, and our equity commitment is to recognize, condemn, disrupt, and seek to rectify systemic injustices that create barriers to children's success. And you'll be hearing more during our presentation about how we have aligned some of our equity work with the Imagine Neighborhood podcast as well. So also to share that Committee for Children's offices sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, past and present, specifically the first people of Seattle, Washington, the Duwamish tribe, which is where Casey and Scotty and I are today. And we have people from all over the world joining us, which is very exciting. And the Imagine Neighborhood podcast is an award-winning podcast with 40,000 subscribers and nearly 750,000 families reached. And we are very, very happy to have you here today to, like I said, learn more about that and also about how you can integrate the Imagine Neighborhood into your classroom along with Second Step or other SEL initiatives that you have going on in your school or district. Many of you know us by the Second Step family of programs. Second Step is used in I think something like 27,000 schools now, and it really is a very well-regarded program that is used all around the country. And we also have versions of Second Step for out of school time, which maybe you weren't aware of. And also more recently, we released an SEL for Adults program, which is exciting. So the Second Step family of programs supports the whole child to build SEL competence, prevent bullying, and protect children in school, and now has expanded beyond the classroom to support out of school time and SEL for adults. Second Step programs provide a holistic approach to building supportive communities for every child through social emotional learning. And we are not going to be talking anymore about the Second Step program today, other than to share how it can work with Imagine Neighborhood. But if you are interested in learning more about that, you are welcome to visit our website or join us for a webinar on the Second Step program. So I have already introduced my colleagues briefly here, but I just would like to say hello to them again, and we're really excited to have them here as our main presenters so that we can all learn more about the amazing Imagine Neighborhood podcast. So Scotty, do you want to just share a little bit of background about why we created the podcast?
Sure, certainly. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Scotty Aseri, and I'm on the innovation team at Committee for Children. One of our goals on the innovation team is to really focus on how can we support kids' social and emotional development outside of the classroom? How can we support the work that the teachers are doing in the classroom with more kind of resources at home? And so in 2019, we had this idea to create a audio podcast, something that is story-based, that takes the lessons from Second Step and really puts them in a context for at-home use, for families to use. Because we all know, kids are only in school for part of the day, but also SEL is one of those skills that, like, if it's only happening in one place, it doesn't have the full effect of it. We really want to get kids and families to be thinking about the concepts that they're working on in class, at home, on their way to school, and in other contexts of a kid's life. So our question with the podcast is, can we make something that works for families, and can we help parents engage in their kids' SEL development in a different way? So what we did is we created a show with dinosaurs and robots and fun, fantastical things. These are all original stories that combine music and sound effects with the lessons from Second Step. If you go to the next slide, we'll play you a little sample of this. I need to give you a little bit of background in this. So each episode has an original story with our characters. And this episode that I'm going to play you for is aligned with the Second Step lesson around problem solving, about using an if-then to figure out a solution to a problem. In our story, in the Imagine neighborhood, we have a dinosaur princess named Princess Donosaurus, and she has stolen all of the socks in the neighborhood for the annual Sock Puppet Festival. So what we do is, why don't we play the clip now? We can talk about what it does next.
Well, I'm not sure you've thought this through. When you made your plan to take away everyone's socks, it would have helped to do a little if-then.
A little which when?
Well, an if-then. It's a trick that you can use when you're making a plan. It helps you think about what you're doing and what might happen next. So you can say to yourself, if I take all the socks in the neighborhood, then nobody else has any socks anymore. You can even do a little song if you want. Like, if I take all the socks.
No socks. I like that. Let's practice. If I eat pepper.
I sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you. Oh, how about if I swim in whipped cream?
That's gross. Also, you'd be sticky for weeks, and you never get it out of your ears. Oh, how about if my shoes were banana peels?
You'd fall down.
That's correct. T-Rexes are graceful, but banana peels are very slippery. What a diverting game.
Yeah. In fact, actually, I think we got a little off track here. If you take all the socks in the neighborhood, then nobody else except you has any socks.
No socks.
Right. So let's do another if-then.
That whipped cream was very sticky. So as you can hear in the
I would say if you're a Second Step user, you probably recognize some of that language from Second Step. I think that's a great way to sort of, for those that are using Second Step, to see how they could incorporate it already.
Exactly, and that's a lot of what we're doing on the show. Is we're finding those core pieces of wisdom from the Second Step program and building them into fun catchphrases, or as even Princess Dinosaur says, it's kind of a game. We wanted to use those as prompts for families to help remind kids to practice these skills at home. So with if then, we made it into the fun little shave and a haircut rhyme. When it comes to something like building empathy, we have a thing on the show called switcheroo, where characters shout switcheroo, and they switch brains, and their bodies they switch bodies, and they can see from someone else's perspective. So we're able to take this sort of fun, fantastical, science fiction-y world and tell stories where the skills from Second Step are actually coming to life in ways that are easy to do at home and easy for parents and other grown-ups to remember to help prompt the kids. We also include some great story or conversation prompts within each story. At the end of each episode, we'll prompt kids to ask your grown-up about something. So in the if-then episode, we can ask your grown-up how they think about the consequence of an action, for example, or ask your grown-up how they feel when they're feeling sad. We're hearing from a lot of families that this is a great way to remind parents to engage in these conversations, but it's also actually getting kids to reach out to the parents on that front and learn more about about how their parents deal with their social and emotional development. So how do we develop these shows? Well, as we said, we start with the second step lesson, although we do branch out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And we look for these fun phrases and rhymes that are easily repeatable. I mentioned switcheroo. We have if-then. We have this sort of library of catchphrases for families to use at home. And our theory was that these families would use these prompts both to remind the kids of the skills they'd learned, but also to put them into practice for the grown-ups themselves. I should mention, because we're an audio-only show, we don't have actual official versions of what any of the characters look like. And so we encourage audience members to draw them and send them in to us. So if you've wondered what Princess Donosaurus looks like, this is one interpretation of her. And next to her is Macho Supreme. So these are all drawings from kids in different classrooms around the country that have sent them in to us.
I love that. I love the artwork. Scotty's showed us a lot of artwork that our listeners have shared with us. And I also think if I was a teacher using Imagine Neighborhood, I think it'd be a nice thing to have kids sort of drawing while they're listening to it. Some kids have a hard time just sitting and listening, and giving them, to be able to draw while they listen, I think is also a way to kind of, give them something else to do if that's a struggle for some kids.
Yeah, and it's also been a great way for kids to kind of make it their own, to make their own version of what this world looks like. And we've got a little bit more information on that coming up in a few slides here. But
yeah, that's about audio podcasts, right?
Yeah.
A lot of imagination that can come in.
It's true. So we are working from the same research base as Second Step, and a lot of the amazing researchers at Committee for Children help us out. Dr. Sherry Whedon specifically and Mia Dosis contribute to every single script. They're looking at it, making sure that we're actually teaching the lesson that we want to teach, that that it is developmentally appropriate, and that it aligns with what research is suggesting. We've also been super lucky to be able to work with experts outside of Committee for Children on different topics. One of the places that we've branched out from the Second Step curriculum is to be able to be really responsive to what families are going through at any given moment. And the last 2 years have had families dealing with a lot. So as kids were home more and remote schooling, there was a lot more activity on platforms like Roblox and Minecraft. So we partnered with Dr. Kelly Mendoza of Common Sense Media to do episodes around cyberbullying and online behavior. After the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, we worked with Dr. Aisha White from the University of Pittsburgh's Pride program to develop a series of episodes on positive racial identity development. And that was very generously supported by the Allstate Foundation. We'll have some more information about that series in just a second here. So I'd like to hand it over to Casey because she's been working with a lot of great teachers who are using the podcast in their classroom. We truly designed the podcast to be used anywhere, thinking that it would be an at-home resource for families. In fact, the length of each episode is the approximate length of the average commute time in the U.S. That was our original idea behind that. But since our launch, we've heard from a lot of teachers who are using it in really interesting ways in their classroom. And I'd like to kick it over to Casey to tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Scotty. It's always been really inspiring for me as a former educator and for someone who has spent years at Committee for Children in my prior role supporting use of the Second Step program to see how a resource like this, which is so focused on kind of the reinforcement of the skills that we teach in this very critical and regimented and sequential way through a curriculum like Second Step, can then be found, in car rides and at home and, in lunchrooms or in, kind of calm down spaces and things like that in classrooms. So I've been so inspired by my work with teachers and educators across the country who are listening to the Imagine Neighborhood with their students and really finding a huge benefit there. So like I said, many teachers use the episodes to reinforce the skills that are being taught explicitly through Second Step and modeled in the classroom and school settings. Students are encouraged to draw pictures, like we've been showing you all these incredible pictures we get from kids all over, to accompany the story because, as Scotty said, it being an audio-based podcast, every child gets to imagine what their friend Count Vacula would look like or what their friend Macho Supreme would look like. And it's really fun to see, even if every student in the classroom draws Princess Donosaurus, you're going to get 20 different Princess Donosauruses back, and that's amazing. We also provide in our weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for at our website, ideas for kind of continuing activities, including journal prompts and Some of them include rhymes and chants and things like that play off of the activities in the episode. And then for some episodes, and we're expecting to expand this, but for some episodes, maybe the ones that might be more challenging in a school setting or more challenging to initiate those kind of core conversations with family members, we do have activity pages to kind of support some of the language and vocabulary. Nothing is beyond an elementary school level, but for the Imagine Equity series that Scotty referenced, where we really wanted to dive into this concept of equity and supporting at a young age developmentally appropriate anti-racist conversations, we also wanted to provide supports for adults about how to kind of engage and build upon those themes in the episode. So we have activity pages that can be found on our website that kind of draw out in a more lesson plan style for some specific episodes and can be a bridge to conversations at home and even start those conversations with the families of the students in your classroom.
Casey, you had mentioned elementary school, and I think that also, there was one of our viewers had asked a question in the chat box asking about what is the age range that this podcast is aimed at. I don't know if you or Scotty want to answer that question. I think that could be helpful.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. Ideally, this was kind of seen, and through our work with our expert researchers, we've kind of seen it as a 5 and up, like kindergarten through 5th grade sort of bracket. But we have heard of younger students in preschool and younger siblings of, the listeners of the show really loving kind of all of the silly stories and all of the great sound effects and all of the wonderful music. And so in pairs, siblings will listen together, or preschoolers, including in Chicago, we have a partnership with a teacher out there who supports the Imagine Neighborhood by sharing it with her preschoolers and sending it out to her preschool students, families, and things like that. So the themes and the real kind of like critical SEL skills that are being developed and supported through these episodes are probably most developmentally appropriate for the elementary school bracket. But we also hear from some middle schoolers that they really appreciate it. We've seen it used in tier 2 settings for students with special needs as they get older and on the autism spectrum. So I wouldn't say that there's a hard and defined window, but when we write the episodes and produce them, that kind of 5 to 10-year-old range is really in mind. Is that right, Scotty? Did I cover it?
I think that's exactly right. We do also occasionally hear from grown-ups who do not have kids or who do not work with kids who just enjoy the show. I think that's been a big part of the goal was to create something that, I'm a parent as well, and there's a lot of kids content that is really hard for adults to pay attention to. So we wanted to make something that was not necessarily a kids show, but was a family show, something that families could enjoy together. So there are references and jokes and things in there that are if you're the grown up, you will get that can still be part of the fun for the kids, but they don't have to understand who Ludacris was or anything. Yeah.
Nice. Well, tell us about Imagine Equity, Scotty. This is an exciting part of your work.
I'm incredibly proud of this work. So one of the things that we're able to do with the podcast is be really responsive to what is going on in the world. We happened to launch, coincidentally, in March of 2020, the same day that schools in Seattle closed for COVID. So we were able to really turn the wheel really quickly and start doing it. We created a pixie pandemic in the Imagine Neighborhood and could take the research from Second Step and have kids talk about frustrations in the context of quarantine or disappointment when something you were looking forward to gets canceled because of COVID. And then another piece of that was after the George Floyd murder. It was really important for us to have conversations around race and equity. So we had a couple episodes in that that talked about that in 2020, and then the Allstate Foundation very graciously stepped in and funded 6 episodes about race, identity, and making things right. We were able to work with, I mentioned Dr. Aisha White from the University of Pittsburgh, but also the anti-bias leadership team of Dermot Sparks, Lee Keenan, and Nimmo, who who have done a lot of research around helping kids develop healthy racial identities, helping them understand the difference between justice and injustice, and helping them understand that they can actually be a part of making positive change in the world. So we're really excited to work with them and also bring on new creatives with lived experience in a variety of identities to help kids understand how to talk about their identities and how to make things right if they see race-based bullying. If you could go to the next slide, please, Amy. So this series is, as I said, 6 episodes. There are also some bonus episodes where we talk to Dr. Aisha White about how parents can be having these conversations with their kids, and how other grown-ups can have conversations with younger people about starting those conversations, and as well as a behind-the-scenes episode with the creative team to talk about how we developed these episodes, why we made the choices that we made, and how we want to encourage kids everywhere to stand up against discrimination, to celebrate their identities, and to feel comfortable in the skin that they're in. So a big thank you to the Allstate Foundation for funding this project. I would love to play you a short clip of one of the episodes coming up next. This is an episode called Anyone Can Play. And in it, we have 2 of our characters, Count Vacula and Macho Supreme. They've been playing with action figures, and we made a rip-off Star Wars, Star Trek, Flash Gordon kind of show called Nebula Trek in the Imagine Neighborhood. And they're playing with their Nebula Trek figures. Macho is white, and Count Vacula is Asian. And that's something that's been true for the entire life of the show. But having our characters with established racial identities was really interesting, working with them in this context. So as Macho and Count Vacula are playing with their action figures, Count Vacula keeps wanting to figure out what character he could play. And then this happens. Did you guys reach the rainbow gem yet?
Almost.
Macho would have gotten there a lot quicker if Count Vacula would stop interrupting.
Interrupting?
Well, I keep trying to help by pretending I'm one of the characters, but Macho says I can't.
Macho, what?
It is simple. Count Vacula keeps wanting to play characters that Count Vacula cannot play.
I see. Wait, what?
Well, I thought I'd be Dash Valkyrie, but Macho said...
Absolutely not.
Did that cardboard box just get smaller?
and then I was gonna be Queen Laserblast.
Count Vacula cannot be Queen Laserblast.
That box is definitely getting
So,
smaller.
I was gonna try to be Calvin Wurtmars.
No!
Oh, what about Dark Mother Zerd?
What? No!
Am I the only one seeing the cardboard box getting smaller?
Macho is just getting bigger.
What about Blasterface Schmasterface?
No! Count Vacula, you cannot play any of these characters.
Well, why not? Why can't I play any of those characters? It's not fun just sitting in a cardboard box and not playing.
Count Vacula cannot play those characters because those characters are white. Count Vacula is Asian, so he cannot play them.
Whoa, Macho!
Oh, I thought, Macho, I thought we were playing together. Because we're friends and we both love Nebula Trek, but I guess you don't want me to play with you because of who I am? Or you just don't want me to play Nebula Trek? Well, I get it now. I guess I won't play Nebula Trek anymore. I guess I'll get rid of my Nebula Trek posters and my Nebula Trek action figures and my special edition Nebula Trek Star Dancer helmet because everybody in Nebula Trek is white and I'm not, so I guess I can't ever play Nebula Trek again. I should take all this stuff down in the garbage since I can't play as anybody in Nebula Trek. Maybe I'll find something new to play with in the garbage can. Thanks a lot, Macho!
You're welcome.
It's always a bit of a rough episode. And I think, but this is an example of something that really gets at the core of what we do in terms of combining the very solid research from Committee for Children with things that kids are dealing with on a regular basis. When we were tackling these episodes, we wanted to think about the frame in which kids might experience race or identity. And so in this episode, we're taking something that it can be fairly common, where kids get a specific idea that Spider-Man has to look one way or Wonder Woman has to look one way, and kind of turning that on their ear and opening the world up for kids. In the conclusion of this episode, we asked kids to talk about, have they ever felt that they couldn't play because of a piece of their identity? Or have they ever brought someone in and let them do whatever they want because of their identity? And further on in the series, we also we tackle things like food-based bullying, where kids that have food that represents their identity might get teased or bullied or made fun of for it, and so we turn that into a food fight on a pirate ship. We're looking for ways that we can take these experiences that kids are having, putting a sort of a slight sheen of fiction on it, but really getting at the core of what's going on in those type of situations.
And you cover a lot of hard topics and brave topics in this podcast, and I think that that's something that your listeners are appreciative of. That you create fun ways to talk about things that can be really stressful life issues for a lot of kids.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think I really appreciate that we have an audience that is engaged the way they are, because we do get requests for things from listeners that's led us to do episodes on things that we probably wouldn't have considered before. Very sadly, we've had a number of requests for episodes around death and grieving. We all know it's likely we all know someone who lost someone in the last 2 years, and we got requests from families to talk about it. And so we did actually two different episodes on dealing with loss, and one specifically about dealing with death. And it's a real privilege, I think, that we have, that families trust us with that kind of request, that the Imagine Neighborhood has become so part of their remote learning or their just the day-to-day life that the characters can help explain difficult concepts to children in a way that parents might be looking for.
Yeah, it's a very complex world right now, and I know in my work out in the field, I've heard from a lot of educators that even things like bullying around the pandemic are really growing, in the sense of who's wearing a mask and who's not, and who's vaccinated and who's not, and we have there's a lot of polarization in our country right now, and I think that's showing up in terms of bullying in classrooms and in communities for kids.
Definitely. We've also been very lucky to make some additional resources around the Imagine Equity series specifically, but around other episodes. And Casey can walk you through some of the cool stuff that we've got to make. Once we heard that teachers were using it either remotely or in their classrooms, we wanted to start finding new ways to support them. And Casey has done an amazing job helping develop those and get those ready. So.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say one last thing about Anyone Can Play and that audio clip we just listened to. Macho Supreme is an incredibly beloved character who we get notes and cards and drawings from kids across the country saying, like, more episodes about Macho Supreme. Macho Supreme made a mistake and misunderstood kind of the rules of play and how to be a good friend to Count Vacula. And one of the kind of essence pieces of the Imagine Equity series is not just identifying all these wrongs in the world, but also how to make things right. And so it's Macho's kind of character arc through that episode where he realizes that he's hurt Count Vacula and he needs to figure out how to make things right with his friend and kind of expand his own world of how to play and how to envision these characters in all of the ways they could be of Nebula Trek. And so I just wanted to say that it has a happy ending and that Macho has this really wonderful, moment of realization where he sees the ways that he can support his friend and that they can play together the way they want to. They both want to. And I think that that's a good lesson for kids too, that one mistake doesn't make you bad person, a bad friend. There's always a way to make things right. So that's one of my favorite parts about the show. But I'll definitely talk about resources for educators. I helped the team create this series of activity pages. We have one, it's kind of framed more of a lesson plan. And like I said, I used to work in schools. I was a former educator, so my brain always goes to like, what are the teachers going to want? What are counselors going to need? How can we really draw out the themes of the lesson, explain, how we came to this conclusion about this is the episode we created, and these are additional talking points and kind of glossary items and things like that to help facilitate those conversations in school settings. So we do have one accompanying activity page per Imagine Equity episode, which can be found on our website. They're downloadable PDFs. They have some prompts for further conversation as well as optional activities that students can do as they listen or afterwards to kind of digest and think about what the characters have just experienced. And so I think that that's a really incredible opportunity for further engagement that right now we have these activity pages for the Imagine Equity series specifically. We have a few sprinkled here and there for other episodes, but it's definitely a priority of the team to have more accompanying kind of lesson plan style supports in the coming year. But signing up for our weekly newsletter on the website will mean that every Wednesday to your inbox, you'll also receive some discussion prompts and activity ideas that build off of that week's episode.
And do you want to tell us about the Radio Free Imagine Neighborhood?
Sure, yeah. Alongside the Imagine Equity, the Allstate Foundation funded this amazing activity book called Radio Free Imagine Neighborhood. It's in the title of the show. We're really big on imagination. And so when we were creating our first book, we wanted to make something that could be a jumping off point for kids to play in the Imagine Neighborhood playground. So we took inspiration from those destroy this journal or wreck this book kind of things and wanted to make something that kids could really get in there, tear up, make something that's their own. So it's about 98 pages of activities, stories, some additional kind of context for different critters in the show. But it's really designed for kids to make their own version of this book. There's prompts to draw each of the characters. As we said, we don't have official versions of them. So characters get introduced as, hey, it's me, Count Vacula. Can you draw me on this next page? But we've also been able to interweave some great sort of SEL lessons within that. There's ways where kids can draw different emotions. There's ways to match emotions with how a character might be feeling. There's things they can create and make and share with someone to help express themselves. So while on the surface it's a fun thing where you're making pirate ships out of cardboard, and at the same time there's a lot of prompts and moments for kids to kind of reflect and think about their social and emotional growth. We've been really excited with this. We've been able to, thanks again to the Allstate Foundation, to do donations to organizations like Reach Out and Read or Test and Trace New York and the National PTA to get more of these books into kids' hands. But this is the one paid resource that we have is the Radio Free Imagine Neighborhood.
And how do they go about getting that?
It's available through the Second Step store or on our website, imagineneighborhood.org/radio-free. So we're hearing a lot of different ways that families are using the Imagine Neighborhood. Some of them, it's part of their morning breakfast routine. They'll play an episode while they're having breakfast. Others are listening to it in the car. We've heard about road trips over the summer or over Christmas where families listen to episodes, or it's a bedtime thing. So the great thing about the Imagine Neighborhood is it's fitting into a lot of different family contexts. It's also as a screen-free resource. We're hearing a lot of families that find that, especially over the last 2 years where there have been a lot of remote schooling and then kids are on devices for recreation and socialization as well, that having one thing that is not screen-based has been really helpful to them. What we also really appreciate is we're hearing from educators that share out episodes that are aligned with where they're at in Second Step. So we have a series on the problem-solving unit of Second Step, and that was included as a remote resource for teachers as they were as they were hitting those lessons in Second Step. Casey, I know I'm going to forget something here, so I wanted to toss to you to make sure we're covering like how families are using it and how educators are bringing it into to the classroom and sharing with those families.
Oh yeah, I think you did cover it. The fact that the Imagine Neighborhood has this alignment with Second Step doesn't mean that we have a 1-for-1 episode per Second Step lesson, but instead we have built upon the foundation of the Second Step core research and those skills that are emphasized in every Second Step unit to, create this fantastical world of the Imagine Neighborhood. So one thing that I'll bring up that I think is maybe on the next slide, but the digital elementary school program we've partnered with that team to make sure that there are aligned Imagine Neighborhood episodes for every Second Step home link. So as Scotty was saying, the fact that the Imagine Neighborhood fits into so many aspects of families' lives bedtime, bath time, road trips, waking up, and we've heard from families who say, we love it, thank goodness it's here, we've listened to every episode like 5 times, and then start from the top and listen to them all again. So we are hearing that, this is a very popular resource at home. And so this can be something that as an educator, you can share out to families to say, hey, listen, this is something that came up today in our second step lesson. Or, I have noticed that we need to talk more about empathy in these contexts, and why don't you listen to this at home, and then we'll have a discussion tomorrow. But it also allows kind of parents to be brought into that conversation and for them to feel that connection to the students' experiences, and I think that's really incredible as well. So next year, we'll be updating the Imagine Neighborhood website, probably by this summer, hopefully, so that you can search for episodes by topic and by lesson. We have an alignment chart in the works so that you can see second step lessons and then connect specifically to an episode that supports those skills. And we also want to have kind of a dedicated resource bank for teachers or educators, where all of the activity pages we've created can live, a kind of understanding of our research can live, and that will be available in our website update this year as well.
And how many episodes are there of the Imagine Neighborhood up to this point?
We're very close to 100. I think we're at like 94. Yeah. So
that's a lot of content. That's a lot of content, whether a family or school. And one thing that also comes to mind for me too is that, I don't know, some of you that maybe use Second Step aren't aware that we have an out of school time version of Second Step that we released just a couple of years ago. And, I think also I could see the Imagine Neighborhood being really fun in an out of school time program. It could also be something in kind of a, a lunch club, or like in an, like even for the librarian, as an alternative to reading books, you could listen to an episode of the podcast. And I could see a lot of other places in a school. Or even, I've seen that some educators used to do this with MindGetty. They would have a headset in the office where if a child had to wait for the principal or wait for a counselor, they could listen to, MindGetty sessions on an iPad. And I can imagine that you could also do the same with the Imagine Neighborhood. You could have a setup so that a student could listen to that while they were, waiting for their turn at the, to talk to their reading specialist or something.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great joys of working with this podcast for me has been to hear about all those different adaptations and ways that they're being used in schools. We have an incredible, super fan, counselor Sam Starr in Connecticut. He's a school counselor for an elementary school, and not only are these these podcast episodes played in classroom settings kind of during SEL time, but he uses them when he has small groups in the front office, like you said, Amy, for, sometimes students need a quiet space to feel calm and to kind of self-regulate, and having an outlet and something to become absorbed by and something to become excited about, like an episode of the Imagine Neighborhood is a really great outlet and resource. So being able to virtually visit his classrooms was so much fun last year. And that's something that I think we've been hearing from a lot of incredible educators about their uses for the podcast too. And I'll say, although I know we're going to emphasize this in a minute, that we love to hear from listeners of the show. Like Scotty said, a lot of our episodes come from ideas that adults who listen with their students or their kids send into us. So if you have a way that the podcast is being used in your school, or you see a way that it could be used, but you would like it to be about this topic, or you have a suggestion for how we can support, transitions from remote to hybrid learning and these different things that we hear about, if you have ideas, then please send them in to kind@imagineneighborhood.org, because we're always in kind of that iterative development process, and the episodes we're working on right now will be published next month, so you have a chance to really influence kind of the direction we go, and I think that's another really incredible thing.
Well, that's one great thing too about a podcast is you can be so much more nimble than with a whole curriculum where it takes years to develop. With a podcast, if something happens, in our community or something, and you need to sort of create an episode, you can do it much more quickly. So yeah, I love the idea of our listeners sharing ideas with us, and I think that's a good segue to our next slide, where Scotty can tell us how to find us.
Yeah. So the main place is imagineneighborhood.org. That's where you'll find all of our episodes. You'll find all of our activity sheets. You can buy the book there. And you can also get in touch with us there. And as Casey mentioned, we are launching this year a much bigger, more robust resource for educators specifically. We've heard a lot of feedback on like, I want to use this. How do I, which second step lesson does it align with, or what's the topic here? And so we are completely redoing our the back end of our website to make that searchable and findable. So if you're working on Unit 2, Lesson 3, you can search on the Imagine Neighborhood and see what episodes we have that would align with those topics. That's also where you can get in touch with us. But we have one social media page, and that is our Instagram. We call it the Infinite Refrigerator, and our goal with that is to highlight the artwork that we receive from our listeners. So if you go to our Instagram, you'll see some amazing drawings of the characters, of me, of the different places in the Imagine Neighborhood. You can also follow us there. That's really the only social media that we pay attention to. The podcast itself is also available anywhere you can find podcasts. If you are already a podcast listener and you use Stitcher or Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, it's available for free on any of them. I do want to flag that we're available on Amazon, and it looks like you have to pay or sign up for an account. If you have to sign up for an Amazon account, it will still be free. But if Amazon is your podcast place of choice, there is no charge for it there. But I found it a little confusing that they have a price tag on it that looks like a subscription thing. But if you're doing that, it's the same content as anywhere else that is also available for free. And you do not need to pay for the Imagine Neighborhood at this moment. And then, as Casey said, please email us, kind@imagineneighborhood.org. We launched right as schools were closing for COVID, and I think we had our first COVID-related episode out within 10 days, 2 weeks. So we're able to be super responsive as things come up in the world, and so we all are wondering what amazing things 2022 has in store for us. And there may be some things that we need to talk about as a classroom, as a school community, or as a family. And so as those things come up, please just let us know, like, what are the things that are happening in your school that we can talk to you, or that we can create an episode around that will help you have those important conversations. On the next slide, we've got a few bonus links. The Imagine Equity series has its own dedicated webpage on our site with downloads of the activity pages. You can also get Radio Free Imagine Neighborhood on the site and the Second Step store. And as Casey mentioned, we do have this weekly newsletter that includes discussion prompts, that includes some activities. You as an educator may not have time to listen to the full episodes, so you'll get a very brief plot synopsis. So you'll be able to understand this is kind of what's going on in the show before you listen to it with your class. And we're really looking forward to this coming year to make this a stronger resource for educators and families, and to continue the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. So, for the Imagine Neighborhood, I'm Scotty Iseri.
Nice. Well, we are this has really been a fun webinar, and I know you guys should be so proud of the success that you've had on the Imagine Neighborhood team. Like I said, I think 750,000 families and 40,000 subscribers is amazing. And I think that just really speaks to the quality of the content and how much kids love it. And we hope that if you're an educator that you can incorporate some of this into your schools and classrooms. But before we adjourn here, I wanted to leave with one final question. And for those of you joining us at home, I would love for you to write this down on a piece of paper or type it into the chat box. But as you hear often on the Imagine Neighborhood, how are you kind today? So perhaps Casey and Scotty want to share their answer to that question. How are you kind today? And for those of you, like I said, joining at home, you can write that down on a piece of paper or type it into the chat box. And yes, we'd love to hear your answers as well.
I'll go first. It's It's one of my favorite things to hear from listeners, how they were kind today. So it's only fair that the question should be turned on us. I guess I was kind. As you can see behind me, I have a lot of plants in my apartment from which I am joining you all. And this morning, today is my watering day. So I woke up early and very lovingly watered all of my house plants, and that was very kind of me. So with the heaters on, they need it. So that was how I was kind today. What about you, Scotty?
Well, I did not get up early, but I was up at my usual time to take my dog out, and someone that I was walking past ran out of poo bags, and so I had a spare poo bag. So I gave somebody a poo bag, a clean, empty poo bag for them to use for their own dog's mess. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, I'll share one. How about that? I have a friend who I know is going through a hard time, so I reached out to him this morning to see if he wants to meet me for a walk after work. So,
Oh, yeah.
yes. So anyway, so we love seeing your answers as well, and we love just the community that all of you have helped us create around the Imagine Neighborhood, and the way you reach out to us and tell us how much you enjoy it and share us the pictures that your kids have painted and drawn, and it's just been such a pleasure for all of us to work, to be able to support the community in that way. So Scotty, would you like to have any closing words for our audience here?
Thank you so much for joining us today. This was really great, and thank you, Amy, for putting this together for us.
Yeah, you're most welcome, and we'll look to have you join us for an Imagine Neighborhood episode soon. Thanks for joining.